Good evening, listeners. Welcome to the third of 4 off-season broadcasts of The King's Court, the online podcast of the Haunted Majestic Haunted Attraction. I'm horror author Michael Nost, and I'll be your host tonight as we meet many of the special guests who will be appearing this fall at Haunted Majestic, West Virginia's only floating haunted attraction and one of the most unique haunts in the country. Haunted Majestic, located in Huntington, West Virginia, will open its gates in 2020 for the last 3 weekends in October with tours of the World War II floating hospital barges and the nearby grounds of Majestic Landing, beginning at dark each Friday and Saturday night. Tickets to the haunt are $17 each, and more details can be found online at www.hauntedmajestic.com. Leading off our show is one of Kentucky's best-known horror authors. R.C. Rumpel, who resides in the Lexington, Kentucky area, joins us on the King's Court to talk about his latest book and his planned return trip to Haunted Majestic this Halloween season. R.C., welcome aboard the King's Court.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here at the King's Court and talking about all the upcoming Haunted Majestic show and about being able to participate in the activities there.
And being a horror writer myself, I know sometimes we have things happen in our past that we find ways to weave into our books. Tell us a little bit about some of your published horror tales and how those real experiences from your past help bring some of those books to life.
Well, I do the same as you a lot of times there. Of course, I did live in a haunted house for a while, and that is kind of the basics of horror across the alley. Of course, I did expand on it greatly there. But, one thing that I found is that in my past, I was a radio announcer, a rock radio DJ for years and years and years, and then I went into stand-up comedy for years, and then I was a corporate training director. And I found that people really just want something they can relate to. Mm-hmm. Something in their life or something that's going around in their lives or that they see happening. And that's what I try to do more so than anything else in my books. It is kind of like Horror Across the Alley. Not only is it a haunted house story, but I kind of cover the plight of growing old as well as bullying and alcoholism and even extreme religious fanaticism and such. In another one of my books, They Lurk in Summer, I cover the topic of animal desertion, which is a real problem, and people just don't realize how bad it really is. Also, I cover spousal abuse and child abuse in that, and even how the Vietnam War affected family life back in the United States during those days.
Wow.
And Gabriella, Tales of the Demon Cat, or From the Demon Cat, I should say. It's a novel-sized book of short stories. I cover so many social different topics. It's unbelievable. Everything from nursing home abuse to our dependence upon technology. And I could go on and with my other books and such. The biggest one that I've had so far that really seems to have hit home with a lot of people, though, is the novella that I wrote, Train of Horror. Train of Blood, excuse me. This is a tale more of how our Native Americans or Native-born Americans were shafted by the greed of the white man, and they decided to get their revenge. They kind of created an army of shapeshifters and went up against one of the last wagon trains crossing the United States. So it's done very, very well in the United States as well as over across the big pond in Great Britain and such. Another thing that I do is I remember back when I was reading on a constant basis. When I was young, I would read 3 to 4 books a week. The library was my constant visitation home. I remember reading Tolstoy's Resurrection or Burgess's A Clockwork Orange, and even though I liked those books, they were kind of a chore to get through. It was either go to the dictionary for Tolstoy or for Clockwork Orange, you had to go to the back of the book for their vocabulary that he wrote with as far as through the book was concerned. And it just got to be a chore. So I find myself more of a storyteller than a writer, or I like to look at myself more as a storyteller than a writer. And I write in what I call common folk language. I want people to just sit back and enjoy the book without having to take that break and lose the flow by going to a dictionary to hunt up a word. I really don't want people to say, man, I learned a lot of vocabulary words by reading that. Instead,
Yeah.
I just want them to say, man, that was a great story. So, that's what I do and how I kind of write things that, maybe in my past that I pull from and try to throw into all of these things.
And as a horror writer, it's really neat that we can actually pull from our past and we can actually cover and talk about some very serious issues in a very entertaining way. And by the way, while most authors attend conventions and fairs and festivals and other venues to meet and greet with the public and sell their books, what is it about Haunted Majestic's offerings that has you coming back for a second visit this year?
Well, basically, it's because of the way I was treated last year by the owners and the people there.
Yeah, me too.
And, I've been at Scarefest the last 4 years in Lexington, or 3 years, excuse me. I'll be there again this year. And then the next weekend, it will be the Haunted Majestic. And I look forward to the Haunted Majestic actually more than I do Scarefest.
Yeah.
Scarefest, there's a lot of people rushing around, and it's more of a what do you got, goodbye type of thing. But at the Haunted Majestic, and company, they're such good people to begin with, and they really take so much care about putting on a good show and a great event, and they care about the people that are coming in. They want to give them their money's worth for sure. Plus, they're one of the few promoters I found that actually does do exactly as they say, as far as with the vendors, the writers and such. And it's just impossible not to go to that. It really is. I love being there. I made a lot of good friends last year and a lot of good fans, and I need to go back and see them again.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I felt exactly the same way. And they love what they do, and it's obvious. Hey, before I let you go tonight, let everyone know what's coming up next for R.C. Rumpel, and where can we find your latest book online?
Okay, well, right now I'm in the beginning stages of a couple of sequels. I've got part 2 of Gabriella Tales from the Demon Cat coming out one of these days soon, and Train of Blood, a sequel to that also, part 2. I've also started a horror tale about a haunted hospital and how the medical industry philosophies have changed over the years, moving more toward profit and treating than actually healing. But it'll be a while before that comes out. Attitudes right now just aren't right for that. There's also a comedy horror satire coming out here. I'm going to go back and pull from my stand-up comedy career a little bit. It's going to be about one of the favorite monsters in the United States, actually about the world. So they're going to be available in some time. I don't know when. I've had an arm and a shoulder injury for the last 7 months, and treatment hasn't been available in the hospital because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So hopefully I'm going to be able to get some treatment sooner or later. I'll be back at the keyboard in time to do the show. Or for the show, I have some of these available for the Haunted Majestic. And again, all my books, they're available at the shows that I'll be attending. They'll be right there at the Haunted Majestic, as well as not only my books, but all the horror anthologies. I've got short stories in 14 or 15 horror anthologies right now, too, that I'll have there. And then they're also available all on Amazon.com.
Our next guest on the King's Court tonight is someone who has a knack for writing, acting, directing, and producing a wide variety of books and movies, but horror ranks up there as one of his favorites. Gary Lee Vincent, who calls the Clarksburg, West Virginia area home, has even used his home state of West Virginia as a backdrop for a series of horror novels. Gary, welcome to the King's Court.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your Darkened book series and its West Virginia roots.
Yes, sir. Darkened came out around 2010. It was during a little bit of a dark time for me. I had just lost my basset hound. It was my first dog, and I also had my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer at the time. And on a positive thing, we just had a newborn little girl, and there was a lot of stress and issues that I was going through, and I was just kind of down in the dumps. I have a publishing company called Burning Bulb Publishing, and up to then, we were mainly focused on nonfiction, business-style books, things like that. And I was talking to one of my coworkers, and he was mentioning that maybe we should just take a crack at fantasy. And he kind of challenged me to write a horror story, and that he would also write a horror story with the eventual goal to have something done by the West Virginia Book Festival that occurred in the fall of each year. Now, that I think has went away after a while, but that in 2010, the West Virginia Book Festival was a really big thing, and we would go there and show our books off, things like that. So we did that. He did a book that was based up around Seneca Rocks about lumberjacks and things like that, horror story, and I decided to do a prototype story just because I was in a dark spot. And the prototype story would blend 3 major themes. We were trying to take character personas from the Dracula story, the general thematic progression that Salem's Lot did in Stephen King's Salem's Lot, and set a brand new story arc in Salem, West Virginia.
Oh. And
it would be a mirror of Salem, West Virginia. And if you spell like things in a mirror or backwards, if you spell Salem backwards, it's MELAS. So it's phonetically sounds Mellis, almost malice, just slightly different spelling. So in the fictitious, that's one town in West Virginia. In the story, it's called Malice, but it's in Salem. And a lot of times people had contacted me after the book first came out to take a tour of Salem just to see the locations. So as of 2010, when the book was created, I went into Salem. I lived in Clarksburg, West Virginia for a large portion of my life, so the Salem wasn't too far away. And we turned it into this really gothic horror town. Aspects of the story, I moved geographically, like Lake Floyd became this big lake where it was near the town that became a centerpiece for a lot of happenings in the situation. So the first book in the series is called Darkened Hills. And it really was just going to be a one-off book, just mainly as a tribute piece to those three things that I'd mentioned. And I was just going to do one and done. Here you go. Here's the book. That's my entry that's my foray into horror. I'm done. That's actually it was experimental writing is what it was. And strangely enough, Forward Reviews magazine got a hold of it. And it was it not only nominated, but it won the 2010 Book of the Year for the top horror novel. Nice. And that's a pretty big award because it gets it into a lot of publicity, a lot of bookstores, independent little niches and stuff. Got to hear about it, and we started getting a lot of activity, a lot of buzz. People were buying the books. A lot of good reviews. Some that, of course, the purists didn't like, that I would take thematic things from the other horror stories, but that's actually what the intention was. But the cool thing was, it allowed me to think that there was really a great interest in West Virginia horror that could have one continuous theme going. So I decided to then make a second book called Darkened Hollows, and that was based in coal mining theme, but it still used the same storyline from the first one, but now branching out into a little more of that Salem area and talking about the coal mines. And in that one, there's a phenomenon that happened a lot before a lot of the mining safety things kicked in, where miners could go under a river accidentally when they're mining, and instead of digging down, going deeper, they sometimes dig up. And when they do, they can crack these water spots, and a lot of flooding can occur. So in Darkened Waters, we took the brand new plot to then deal with ghouls. And so then that was book 2, threw it out there. We even threw in a little bit of Weston and the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, introduced it as a live and active operating facility in our world. And so everything is really, it's almost like a modern story, but it should have been set like right at 1900. That's kind of the theme of Darkened. But we made everything that was operating back then operational now with a little bit of modern conveniences, trucks and driving, things like that to do. But it was just again full with playing with the experiment. And then the third book was called Darkened Waters. Like each one came out about a year apart. And Darkened Waters then deals with the ominous lake that, and I modeled that after the Johnstown, Pennsylvania flood that happened a long time ago that destroyed Johnstown, PA. And in this case, a lot of evil happenings and mischief happenings. It reaches a climax because I thought, well, I've done one book that was going to be a standalone. I'll cap it off with a trilogy. So I destroyed the town in book 3. That was all done. Wash my hands of it. Be done. It's good. We've got a trilogy now. I went to the West Virginia Book Festival, and then people were, you can't end it. We want more. We want to see it again. So I started another trilogy, rebuilt the town, and then brought back the evil. And it was kind of funny because I was just all the time just having fun and goofing with the story and trying to push the limits, and ended up having another trilogy. So the total storyline, the Darkened trilogy was the first one, and the second three books was what I called the Mother of Darkness trilogy, because that was a rise of a vampire queen to build out the new story set. So it was a pretty good run, and I left it at book 6, and that's probably where it will be unless it catches on. Maybe if we ever make it into a made-for-TV series or something, maybe we'll make us keep it going. You never know.
You never say never. I've learned that in my years. And while many of us artists tend to stick to just writing or acting or producing, you seem to embrace just about every position in the horror industry. Tell us about some of your other work, both on screen and behind the screen.
Oh, absolutely. In addition, before I became a writer, I was also a musician. So I've released 3 different CDs over the past 20 years prior to the writing. But I also, to give you a little background story, I would, as a publisher, I would seek out a lot of new and emerging authors and folks that were trying to get their stories out into the mainstream. But I also every now and then would encounter a famous or a published author. And one of those gentlemen was John Russo. And right around the time that my Darkened Souls novel came out, I published his story, Dealey Plaza. And we noticed that a lot of the shows that we would go to, that people would come up to him for autographs because he was the writer and co-creator of Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
He also, not just the screenplay, but he also had the novel with the same name, and he published over 20 different novels of horror, the horror genre. And the thing about the joke was that even though we had brand new books out, his Dealey Plaza and my Darkened Souls book, number 4 of the trilogy, a lot of people were gravitating towards his 1968 movie poster, having him sign the movie poster. And my joke was, well, we don't need to spend a year writing a book. We could just sit here and sign movie posters for $20 and don't even have the printing cost of a book. And the joke, he said, well, I guess you got to be an actor. I'm like, well, Jack, John Russo, we were friends at that point. I'd call him Jack. I said, Jack, I don't really know much about acting besides a little bit of theater work I've done. I said, but to do movie work, etc., I really don't know. And he's like, well, you get something out there, then people like it, and you sign the posters. I said, well, I jokingly said, if you write a cheap movie that I could produce, I will produce that movie. We can cast ourselves in it, and we will have a brand new poster to set out next to Night of the Living Dead, including a DVD. Kind of another sarcastic joke. Really, it really was a joke. And a couple weeks later, he said, hey, Gary, you check your email. Well, what you got, Jack? Another novel for me? I went in the email and it said, my Uncle John is a zombie. Screenplay by John A. Russo. He goes, I am Uncle John, and you are his dim-witted nephew, Oscar. and I didn't know anything about producing a movie at that point. I did books, I've done some music, but I had no idea how to do a movie. So I started looking into acting roles and working on independent movies and just volunteering for everything I could find that I could get into, including extras roles too. So it didn't matter if the part was big, small, whatever. I would try to contact that production and try to help in some capacity, because he called my bluff, but there was a part of me that didn't want to just say, well, just blow it off, because this was actually a chance to make a movie, and it actually appealed to me. I never realized it scratched something in me that was like really fascinating, it was a challenge that I wanted to rise up to. And so I got kind of into the whole acting thing that way, and I got into the producing side through working with that movie. And then I found out that a lot of people, especially independent movies, could use they always needed something, either help with production, or they needed some help in raising funds, or help with publicity, or they needed extras, or sometimes they would need a lead. So as I got into it, some various interesting serendipity took place. And I found out that the more that I did, the more roles I got. And a lot of people would say, well, how do you get on a movie set, or how do you do that? I said, well, it's actually a numbers game. And it's true. For every 20 to 30 productions that I applied to get on, I would actually get one of the roles. And that sounds like a large number, 20 to 30. But over the course of like a couple of years, I've done about 80 movies and television shows. So it looks like a tremendous amount. I guess it is. But one of the things that I was trying to get at was I knew that if I was going to work in that industry, that I should also try to at least give some credibility to what I do. So if I was an unknown actor or an unknown producer, so I figured I better get some productions under my belt and work my tail off, because I didn't have 20 years of acting. I was doing this when I was 40, so I had no acting school or anything. I just jumped in there and just without really knowing much of anything, and just dove right in.
And one of those that you dove right into was AMC's The Walking Dead, which is working on finishing a decade of shows. Tell us about working as Savior on the popular TV series.
Yes. Now, that is one of those serendipitous things that it started off actually on the set of Logan Lucky. I was an extra. In fact, my truck's featured in the movie, but not me. They used my truck. I was supposed to be there about 4 or 5 days on the set, but you may have heard me mention at the beginning of the call that my mother had breast cancer, and something happened where she was on the final stages right around the time we started doing Logan Lucky. So even though I was called in to be a construction foreman on that show, and so I was down in Atlanta, and I got the call that she was really, really sick. So I turned around and came back up to West Virginia. However, the one day that I was on the set of Logan Lucky, I talked to a guy who was an ongoing zombie on The Walking Dead as one of the working extras that changed the look all the time, but always was a zombie. And I said, how did you get on The Walking Dead? And he's like, well, you really got to be really skinny, like size 28 waist and stuff like that. And I'm a big guy, so I was like, well, dang, I'll never get on that. He says, well, you got to kind of follow these different casting outfits. And he gave me this one casting place to follow on Facebook. He says, they'll never say it's for The Walking Dead. He said, but just like them and follow them, and maybe if you apply to something that they post, you might get lucky. And so that was like a year. A year went by since that one serendipitous day. And I was at work at my day job. I was looking at Facebook because it was like by break or something. I was just scrolling through Facebook on my phone. And sure enough, Facebook's weird algorithm had that casting directions. We are looking for a mean guy for a production tomorrow in Sonoya, Georgia. If you can be a mean guy, write us here. And so I just did a selfie of just scrolling at the screen. And I sent it then, and 2 minutes later, got a phone call, and it was this lady named Jeanette. So this is Jeanette with The Walking Dead. Can you be here tomorrow at 6 a.m.? And this was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon in West Virginia. I was like, are you saying for sure if I go down at 6 in the morning, I'm there? I got the part. She says, yes, I am. I said, I'll see you at 6. I simply got in my car right then after work and drove straight down to Sonoya, Georgia, and I got on. Greg Nicotero directed the scene. I got a good camera time, and I'm on season 8, episode 3.
Wow.
And that's how it happened. Again, had I not been down a year before working on the other thing, totally just as a background extra and talking to people that were there doing it, I would never have gotten on. But that's how I got to be a savior. And my character never got killed, so I guess I survived the whole ordeal.
Always a chance for a comeback, too.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, Gary, thank you for talking with us tonight. We look forward to your appearance later this fall at Haunted Majestic. Folks, you can meet Gary Lee Vincent and other actors, writers, and producers from the horror genre during Haunted Majestic's Weekend of the Dead festivities on Friday and Saturday nights, October 23rd and 24th. The gates are open at 6 p.m. nightly, and guests will be appearing under the pavilion at the Haunt until 10 p.m. each evening. Access to photos with and autographs from those special guests are included with your general admission haunt ticket. And you can follow Gary's work and purchase his books and movies through his website at www.garyleevincent.com. Next on the King's Court tonight, we will be talking with Darren Clark, also known as DMF Torch, who hails from the Knoxville, Tennessee area. Now, Darren isn't a horror author at all, but some of his stunts and performances are downright scary. Darren, welcome to the show tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
While our previous guests on tonight's show will be part of Haunted Majestic this fall as authors and actors or producers, I understand your job at the Haunt on the weekend of October 23rd and the 24th is to entertain. Tell us about what you have planned.
Well, it is the week leading up to Halloween, and it is the first time I will ever be performing in the great state of West Virginia. So we're going to light up the night. And we're talking about fire breathing here, flames 15 to 16 feet shooting out of my mouth. We're going to be doing all kinds of tricks with fire. We even do a little bit of fire eating. As far as, I might even throw in a little sideshow stuff here and there. I'm known for that too. I mean, we could do some glass walking, human blockhead. That's a 6-inch spike that goes in your nose. That's always a lot of fun. Might even do some bed of nails or bed of machete. People are just going to have to come out and see what we come up with.
You do it all, seems like. So, we all like to sometimes have a sideline gig that helps us relieve some stress or relieve our youth or something like that. But what on earth would attract you to spend your free time playing with fire?
Well, it all started when I was a kid. I'm actually an Eagle Scout, so I'm a certified pyro. I mean, there's no other way to say that. But I started working for a haunted house just 12 years ago, and they had a fire breather there. And I talked to him the last night of the haunt. He showed me how to do it because I thought it would be fun to try. I kept doing it during the off season, and the next year, that fire breather decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So they made me the primary fire performer for Dead Man's Farm in Lenore City, hence the DMF. After that, got into it with some friends of mine, taught them how to do some fire breathing, taught myself fire eating. Then I had the wonderful pleasure of actually dating someone who was really into the sideshow stuff. And she got me hooked on the history of sideshow all the way back. And so I started learning how to do human blockhead and the bed of nails tricks. And that's just expanded over the years. And it's a lot of fun. The best part, of course, is entertaining people.
It sounds like a lot of fun for sure. Can't wait to meet you. Darren, thanks for being with us on the King's Court tonight.
You are quite welcome. So glad I could join you.
Folks, you can meet the Torch at Haunted Majestic this fall on October 23rd and 24th as he brings his sideshow antics and fire-breathing skills to West Virginia's only floating haunted attraction. All of the fun and excitement he brings to the haunt is included in your general admission haunt ticket. Finally, tonight, we will talk with Dana Toms, the owner of Haunted Majestic, about some of the plans for the 2020 haunt season and about how the unique haunted attraction is beginning to garner attention within the haunt industry. Dana, welcome to the King's Court.
Hey, good evening, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
First of all, let's talk briefly about how in just 1 year, Haunted Majestic is beginning to earn a nationwide reputation as a must-see venue to visit. And I understand the haunt fared well in a recent nationwide vote of haunted attraction enthusiasts. Tell us about that.
Well, a couple months ago when the coronavirus pandemic struck in March and April, there was an online haunt rating company called HauntRater.com. It's a website that goes around annually and views haunted attractions, and then they rate them. They did something called the Haunter Bowl, where they let basically fans do a popularity contest, so to speak, on haunts that they thought were good ones around the country, and they put it up for a fan vote. And we were kind of shocked. We were just online one night looking at it, and there was like 100 and some haunts that had been recommended around the country, and we were one of them.
Wow.
And we thought, well, that's pretty cool, to be to be mentioned out of a top 100 and some in the country. And then the actual competition started, and it was kind of like a single elimination deal. And it just kept going and going and going. And every night when we'd check, we'd moved another round ahead, and we'd moved another round ahead. And finally we got to the top 16 in the country.
Wow.
And we were just like, wow, that's awesome. The number of votes we got. And it was purely, just fan voting from around the country. And of course, we, told our fans, said, hey, go vote for us online. And obviously they did. But, it's obviously that they found a lot of friends to go vote for us as well. But, we just were very honored, in 1 year to have already, garnered some sort of a reputation that would get us, in the top 16 and something like that.
That is really incredible. And while additional publicity is usually a good thing, it also brings with it increased expectations. What is Haunted Majestic introducing for 2020 that new guests can look forward to?
Well, a lot of things. We are really upping the game as far as adding to the number of scenes that we're going to do both inside the vessel and outside in our trail. And we've just been acquiring stuff all year long to, add to that, to create more scenes, to create more things for people to do, and just to kind of make it a more unique haunt. And we're right next door to an airport, so obviously having an airplane involved in our haunt would be something cool. So we are in the process of acquiring a small airplane that we're going to do a scene with, and we've got an ambulance that we're going to be using this year. We have acquired a second hearse. We've acquired a fire engine. So there's a lot of unique stuff that's going to be in our haunt that you're not going to probably see in other places.
That is really cool. Now, lastly, as we all know, COVID-19 has just devastated many industries in this spring and summer and continues to create challenges for operating an event safely. Is the coronavirus impacting Haunted Majestic's plans for this fall?
It has. I mean, we obviously, the big thing is the unknown. We just don't know what the virus is going to do, as is the case with, anyone else as well. Mm-hmm. And, we kind of have to play that contingency, because is it going to get worse? Is it going to be better? Is it going to be gone in October? Those are things that we really can't answer at this point.
Right.
But we have to continue planning as if things are going to be as normal. So we have spent a lot of time talking about it with our management group. We've actually got a lot of coronavirus contingencies in place. We have the opportunity and the availability. If we need to schedule haunts, we can do online ticketing where you don't have to actually come to the ticket window. We can block those tickets into 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute segments to where, you can pick your haunt for 7:45 on a Friday night and, show up and do it and not have to deal with people in close proximity.
Nice.
So we're putting a lot of that in there. We're going to have what we call valet haunt as well, to where you basically check in just like you would at a restaurant with a hostess or a host. And then you're free to roam the pavilion area until it's your turn, and then they'll call you back. So that way you don't have to physically stand in line. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going to be implementing, trying to keep our actors, a good distance away from our guests, things of that nature. So, regardless if the coronavirus gets worse or gets better come October, we're going to be prepared either way to make it a great experience.
Well, Dana, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me tonight.
Hey, thank you for having me, and we look forward to seeing you again come October, and bring your friends with you.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that concludes tonight's broadcast of The King's Court. We hope you enjoyed meeting some of the special guests who are coming to Haunted Majestic in October 2020 and learning about how the haunt is preparing for your visit. You can listen to our previous 2 podcasts online at www.hauntedmajestic.com. Just click on the media section of the website and scroll down to the King's Court broadcast, where all of our shows are archived for your listening enjoyment. Until we speak again on September 1st, when we broadcast our final 2020 episode of The King's Court, I am your host, Michael Nost, and I wish you well until we meet again.